This is the Switch 2. Well, or at least it could be. It's actually the Lenovo Legion Go. Now don't click off. I'm not clickbaiting. Just hear me out for a second. Lenovo was kind enough to send me a review unit of their new handheld PC. Originally, I was going to compare this to the Nintendo Switch, but I technically already did that with the Steam Deck, and most of that kind of applies here. So instead of a comparison, I'm going to be looking at this as a potential Switch 2, and see what Nintendo can learn from this, and see what they might need to avoid from looking at this console. But first, let's talk about the size. This chonker is hefty, weighing in at pretty much double the weight of the current Switch OLED. The weight itself isn't that big of a deal for a burly man like me, but we have to remember, these consoles are with kids in mind, and 2 pounds could be quite a lot with little baby noodle arms. Honestly, do you even lift, bro? But in reality, the size of this does take away from the portability factor. So I think Nintendo should stick with their smaller overall design. The bulk of the design is taken up by this 8.8-inch 2560 by 1600 144Hz display, which is almost 2 whole inches larger than the Switch OLED and 4 times the resolution. At first, I had 2 thoughts. 1, the screen is too big, and 2, there is no way this hardware can push out that resolution at anywhere near that refresh rate. And I was right on the second one. A 144Hz display is a complete waste on a handheld device at this time. The current generation of hardware can't push anywhere near that sort of frame rate at those resolutions. So really, Nintendo should just stick with their 60Hz display for the Switch 2 and, you know, save on some of that battery life as well. As for resolution, at first, I thought this was a waste as well, until I remembered that this thing has AMD FSR. That's right, resolution upscaling, which is pretty much fancy words for some hardware that will let you render at lower resolutions and then upscale that image to a higher one. And this can make a huge difference to performance with PC gaming. So if Switch 2 can implement this upscaling across all their games, then a higher resolution screen like this is actually viable, even if the hardware can't push those native resolutions. We're not quite there yet for handheld hardware, as even the Legion Go was struggling to push upscaled games over 30 frames per second unless I lowered the base resolution really low and made everything look smeary. But maybe the next generation will be able to handle this, especially since Nintendo works with Nvidia for their chips, and Nvidia's upscaling and frame generation tech is arguably much better than AMD's. As for the size of the screen itself, at first I thought it was too big, but as I played with it for a while, I got used to it and actually liked it. However, it does trade off some of the portability the Switch has. So for the Switch 2, while a physically bigger screen might be nice, we don't really need one much larger than the Switch already has. Maybe split the difference and go for a 8-inch screen, I don't know. But I trust Nintendo will do what's best when it comes to size, as they've pretty much done so far. Now let's talk about storage. Both the Steam Deck and the Legion come with NVMe SSDs, which are much faster than the flash storage the Switch has, or SD cards. And while those are fine for a lot of games still, big open world games which have to constantly load in data suffer from slower storage. So we definitely need some faster storage on the Switch 2, so that maybe the next Pokemon game doesn't suffer as much. As for size, with games getting bigger and bigger, let's at least get 512 gigabytes in there. Hey, maybe, but it probably won't. It'll probably get at least 128. I just want 512. And of course, we gotta keep the SD slot for additional storage, which makes me wonder about the next part. Will the Switch 2 have physical games? Now, I love physical games and collecting them, but it does suck at times to be out on the go and not have the game you want to play with you. Let's be honest, they're not going anywhere. Unlike the Lenovo, I believe the Switch 2 will still have physical games. Will it be backwards compatible? I don't know. Most likely, I hope so. Or else, you know, this was all for nothing. Another thing that stands out here are the controllers. Looks like Lenovo actually tried to take a page from the Switch on this one and made them detachable like Joy-Cons. As for the Switch 2, I think Nintendo should definitely stick to that format, but not necessarily for the reasons you might think. Yeah, it's really convenient to pop off a Joy-Con and toss it to a friend for some quick multiplayer sessions, but the real reason why the Switch 2 should have removable controllers is for the repairability. These Switch Joy-Cons are notorious for developing drift, but since they're detachable, it makes sending them off for repair or repairing them yourself fairly painless. And if you do have to send them off for repair, you can continue playing your console with another set of Joy-Cons or a Switch Pro controller while they are gone. RIP Switch Lite users who have to send out their whole console if they get drift. That would suck. And while Nintendo has gotten a bit better in regards to the drift issue, I still have concerns for their future controllers. So yeah, keep the detachable controllers for sure, but maybe throw in some Hall effect sensors, just like what we see with some third-party controllers. If you don't know, Hall effect sensors, they remove drift. It's impossible, essentially. But Nintendo, please don't do this. There's buttons on the sides of the controller, and it's not only the number of them, they have terrible placement. The left controller isn't that bad, but the right one is absurd. There are buttons under my palms when I hold the controller. This placement is just terrible during my playtime with the system. I was constantly accidentally pressing them in. Now I get you're supposed to detach them and use them as a makeshift mouse. It just doesn't work for the other 99% of the time you're using this device handheld. If I really want want a mouse, I just pack a mouse with me. So Nintendo, stick to the classic button layout you have. Or maybe add a couple more like on the Steam Deck, but please don't do this. And let's briefly talk about networking. Both the Steam Deck and the Switch can be painfully slow to download some of these larger games. But the Legion has a more powerful Wi-Fi 6 card and could download games much faster than both of these other handhelds. So please Nintendo, I know networking is your last priority, but don't skimp out on the Wi-Fi in the Switch 2. So while this isn't the Switch 2, parts of it could be. Some lessons on what to do and what not to do. Hopefully Nintendo has been taking some notes and uses some of these features on their next console. If you want to see how the current Switch compares to other PC handhelds like this, click this video. And if you want to see 50 games compared on Switch versus Steam Deck, click this video. Tell me what features you want to see in the next Switch 2. Please consider liking and subscribing. I hope to see you in the next one. See you later.